but that's alright.
Oh my god!
Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we got the Sony State of Play that was basically entirely Borderlands. There was nothing else shown. We got 20 minutes of Borderlands 4 gameplay. We saw gameplay, we saw UI, we learned about the manufacturers, the skill trees. There's so much information, and in addition to the video that they put out, there's also a bunch of blogs going up from different websites that have even more information. I'm going to be breaking down everything that you need to know about Borderlands 4 and all the new information that we learned today. Hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Let's get right into it. If you guys want to see the full, unedited video, I'll have a link down to that in the description. I'm mainly going to be breaking down all of the new information and tidbits that we got from this, which there is a ton to talk about. So one of the biggest things that is new to talk about is the complete change that they're doing basically to weapon parts in the game. Now, weapon parts have existed in Borderlands for a long time. In Borderlands 2, they were something that was impactful if you were min-maxing or you were hardcore into Borderlands, was finding the right grip or the matching pieces on a gun. In Borderlands 3, weapon parts existed, but they really didn't make much of a difference. You really were just looking at the damage or the elements or the fire rate, not so much as weapon parts. Weapon parts are making a big return in Borderlands 4. As we can see on this example of this submachine gun, this purple submachine gun has 3 different weapon type parts on it. And any weapon can roll with multiple manufacturer parts, and the higher the rarity, the more parts that the weapon can come with. So legendary pieces of gear are going to have the highest the variety of weapon parts. And if we look at this SMG, it's got Torg licensed sticky mag, which fires sticky gyro jets that explode on reload or when switching modes, which increases explosion damage by 3% each. TDR licensed accessory, shooting legs. Thrown weapon has legs and shoot enemies until out of ammo. And then it has a Maliwan part, can switch between corrosive and incendiary elements. So basically, what they're doing is they're bringing weapon parts to the forefront. Every single gun in the game now can drop with multiple parts. You could get a gun with multiple TDR parts, or a Maliwan Torg TDR like this that's going to augment the weapon and completely change the way that it plays. The thing that's really crazy about this is they showed off a legendary weapon that they picked up that was the same legendary weapon from a previous trailer, and it looked completely different. And the fact that legendaries are going to be impacted by this is so cool, because legendary weapons are obviously going to be unique in what they do, but you're going to be able to kind of min-max or farm specific legendaries with specific parts, and those will actually have a big variation on your gameplay. For example, if you're going to make a redistributor build, for example, if it was in this game, I don't know if it is or not, but if you're going to make a redistributor, you could try to farm a redistributor with Jacob parts so that redistributor would ricochet more. Or if you were going to make a rocket launcher build, you could farm for a rocket launcher with Jacob's parts so it could ricochet. And so one of the big things that they're doing is they're putting so much more significance on the parts of the weapon rather than the anointments or other things like that. It is really, we're going back to part variance and farming parts on your weapon. That is what you're going to be caring about, which means that you're there's just going to be so much more variation, and they're bringing parts to the forefront. Now, the other thing that they're doing to further emphasize how important parts are going to be is these new enhancement modifications. Now, these are replacing artifacts. We're not getting artifacts anymore. We're getting these enhancement modifications, and enhancement modifications will roll passives on them. As you can see, this blue one has weapon status effect damage. The higher the rarity, the more rolls it will have. So a blue has 2 of these passives, and a legendary has, I believe, 4. They go over blue. The blue's got ADS proficiency and accuracy, so they still roll random passives like they would in a kind of artifact type deal, but these are going to have bonuses that are specific to your manufacturer. So, for example, weapons with Jacob licensed parts gain a 40% chance to ricochet non-critical bullets. For example, once again, if we're trying to make a redistributor build, we would try to find a redistributor specifically with a Jacob's part so that we could use this enhancement modification to get even more ricochets on our redistributor, which would already be ricocheting around a lot. And this is super interesting because when you're farming for a specific build or for like a specific weapon, there's different bonuses that you're going to really care about getting specific parts on your weapons. For example, I think it was this blue one that they moused over. This weapons with Ripper licensed parts increase weapon damage. That's basically consecutive hits. There was one that they moused over that specifically said that you like regen ammo in your magazine, I think it was, for a specific weapon type. So let's say you're trying to make like an infinite fire weapon. You're then going to try to find that part that you could get the bonus for to give you, like, for example, mag regen on that weapon. And I think this is such a clever and cool way of doing this because weapon parts have always been a big part of Borderlands, but they've always been something that's been like, you know, pretty niche. For example, my first time playing through Borderlands 2, I didn't know about anything about weapon parts. They were kind of this thing that was a cool part, but only if you were like really deep into Borderlands or like really cared about it or really looked into it. Most casual players playing through Borderlands 2, for example, didn't know about weapon parts or their impact on the things. Now, their weapon parts are going to be important to casual players and your hardcore grinders because in order to make the builds that you want, you're going to need to get synergies with different parts and different enhancements to make the best builds. And I think that's going to bring a huge amount of variance and like gameplay decisions. And they've just basically removed anointments, which were pretty contentious system, and put them into these enhancements so that when you get a weapon to drop, you really care what that weapon is. You don't care if it rolls with a plus 300% after you phase slam or 165% splash damage. What you care about is the gun, and they're bringing the importance back to your guns, and I think that is great. The next decision that they've made that's really cool has to do with grenades. Now, I was actually having this discussion with buddies literally the other day about how grenades in Borderlands 3 specifically just didn't feel as great. There were cool grenades, there were exceptions, but like I just never actually clicked the grenade button unless I was playing specifically like a grenade build. And not to compare it to Destiny, but Destiny has grenades and a system with it where like if you throw a grenade in Destiny, if you're not on a grenade build, it can vacuum up all the enemies or do a bunch of damage. And you don't get to use that grenade all that often, but when you do, it feels impactful. And then if you're on a grenade build with like an exotic, then you can get a ton of damage from them. What they've done now is they've put grenades in an ordinance slot. And those grenades are going to be on a cooldown, so you can get super crazy grenades, and when you throw them, they're going to be awesome because they're going to be managed by a cooldown rather than you getting like 30 of them. But at the same time, it's also going to be shared with a rocket launcher slot. Rocket launchers have always been kind of in this weird place in Borderlands, and now if you don't want to use a grenade, if your build doesn't use them or you don't care about them, you can use a rocket launcher. But it's not just rocket launchers in this heavy ordnance slot. You can now do like machine guns. They were pulling out basically a full arm like Gatling gun and firing. And if you want to use that, you can. And so now they're going from this kind of thing that like you could use or couldn't use to like kind of this slot that you can always have. Maybe you're going to use it for utility. Maybe you're going to use it for damage. Maybe use it for healing. But they've kind of completely worked the like heavy weapon archetype. The next thing that they're changing is this, I forget exactly what they called it, like this like stim slot. It is right here. Basically, every character is going to have, well, to start, the new slots are you're going to have 4 weapons. You've got your ordnance slot, or where you could put a grenade or like a minigun. You've got your like Repkit, that's what they called it. And then you've got your enhancement, you've got your class mod, and you've got your shield. And these Repkits are totally new to Borderlands. And these are something that you can use as like for different purposes. One of the main ones, probably the most basic, is that when you click it, you're going to heal yourself. They're kind of like stims. So if you get low HP, you click it and then you heal yourself. But they also said that they can have advanced effects, such as giving yourself like a movement speed buff or something like that. The Buffmeister was something in Wonderlands that was really cool, but it was just too potent, but like the idea of such as the Buffmeister is being the ability to like buff yourself up in key moments or give yourself a damage increase when you needed it. This Repkit is basically going to be a new healing system, but it's also going to be a way to like further enhance your gameplay. Maybe you want more speed. Maybe you get a Repkit that like allows you to instantly get out of fight for your life. Just more build variety, and that looks really cool. The next thing to talk about is the new skill tree system and the massive changes that they've done to it. This is looking really cool. It seems like we're going to have even more choice and even more kind of build crafting in Borderlands 4 than we've had, which is awesome. But let me break down how this is going to work, and then we'll go over like Vex's specific abilities. So Vex is the new Siren. She has 3 different skill trees. Her right one, the red one, is like a summoning skill tree. This green one looks to be kind of like this like demon incarnate form, which allows you to like grow wings and send out like eldritch blasts at enemies. And then I don't know what the blue one is going to be about. We did see some like I'm not sure, but basically the way that the system is going to work is you're going to be speccing into your starter tree, which is this like starting points, and then once you put, it looks like about 10 points I think is what it showed in the thing. I'm not sure if that was for the capstone or for this. Definitely has to be more than 10 points. But you get to slot your action skill. It's going to be like 1 action skill per tree. So as opposed to Borderlands 3, where it was like multiple action skills, it's 1 action skill per tree, but every action skill has its own augment. That is what this shape is. And so, for example, you can socket this augment, or this augment, or this augment, or this augment into your action skill to completely modify it. And then there's this socket. This socket is for your capstone. Different capstones are going to have different abilities. They showed off for her like pet that it could get a aura that did ordinance damage, like grenade damage as an aura around it. But your capstones are obviously going to be huge for your build, but they're also interchangeable. So you can spec down to this tree and get this capstone, and spec down to this tree and get this capstone. You can only have 1 active at a time, but it's going to be a big augment to your ability. And the amount of like points and the amount of skills to put in looks like there's even more variation. I'm imagining we have to be getting a higher level. Like I can't imagine that we're going to be only level 50 when this game comes out. Maybe we'll see. But there's so many points to put in all of these trees. Plus, you've got other trees where you know, if you want to do like a full green tree build and then half into red, like, you know, there's just so many things to put into here. But we've also got like, you know, 1 out of 1s. But the way that capstones are going to be working are going to be very different, because capstones now look like they're specifically augmenting your action skill. And then you can mix and match different augments for whatever you want to play as. For some Vault Hunter specifics, Vex's incarnate action skill creates a phase explosion, which deals damage to nearby enemies, which fully restores her health. And then while you're in Vex, which is a mode that lasts for 25 seconds, you can use Eldritch Blast, and you get increased movement speed. Eldritch Blast becomes like an L1 ability that you just can spam out of your offhand, which deals damage to nearby enemies on impact. And then when you're shooting, you get reduced Eldritch Blast's cooldown. So that looks pretty cool. And then you can hold L1 to end Incarnate early. Her other action skill is Phase Familiar, which allows her to summon a minion named Trouble, who you can kind of command. Think about like a flak pet. You press L1 to teleport Trouble, dealing damage in an area. Trouble then transforms into a badass, fully restoring its health and gaining increased damage for a duration. So it sounds like this is going to be something that like you kind of have up always, but you can like use an action skill, ESC button press to turn it into a badass and like enable its big damage. And then in this tree, you've got a bunch of options to augment this. You got Vex movement speed, damage reduction. Vex deals increased action skill damage the higher her health. This is one of those nodes that, like, for example, like you could pick this node but use a different tree. Then our first augment, Blink Strike. When you command Trouble, it blink strikes, which always critically strikes enemies below 50% HP. Violent Outburst is another augment skill. You can command Trouble to explode himself, dealing ordinance damage to all nearby enemies and restoring health. While Phase Familiar is active, sacrifice 33% of its max health instead. And then the capstone that they showed off is Trouble Bubble. Trouble now gains overshields whenever he deals damage. While Phase Familiar is active, Trouble gains an elemental aura, dealing ordinance damage over time to nearby enemies. this is really neat because one, it's just an AoE that's going to be dealing a bunch of damage, but it looks like Ordinance damage might be a new type of damage. Maybe Ordinance damage is kind of like explosive damage or not, or it's specific to like, it's an aura that does grenade damage. Sounds crazy. So I'm sure there's some crazy things that you could do with that. Next, let's talk weapon manufacturers. They showed off that there are going to be 8 manufacturers, 5 returning and 3 new ones. They are basically getting the same things. Jacob's ricochets. Malawan is going to be your elemental. Vladoff is high fire rate, large mag size. Chidiort is going to be your chucking weapons. And Torg is your big explosive weapons. And then in addition to that, we're getting 3 new weapon types. Order, which is kind of like a hold down and shoot. The Ripper, which are these like kind of full auto weapons. And then Daedalus, which can swap between different weapon types. Or like weapon ammo types. They showed off a weapon that was swapping between an assault rifle mode and a pistol mode. So I'm assuming that's a Daedalus weapon. I think it might be a bit like with Vladoff, where you could like swap to like an underbarrel mode with like an assault rifle, or like swap to an underbarrel, which is a shotgun. But they also confirmed that there's going to be underbarrel modes in this. So maybe you could swap from like a pistol with a shotgun barrel to an assault rifle with like a sniper barrel. I don't know. I'm sure it's going to be crazy. But one of the things that's really neat about here is you'll note that I didn't mention Hyperion, I didn't mention Dahl, I didn't mention Atlas or COV, which aren't returning gun manufacturers. But in this little preview that they showed off of the different weapon manufacturers that can all impact a weapon, they did show off Hyperion. And so this weapon has a Hyperion shield, kind of like if you opened a redistributor or a butcher, it would put that shield out that would protect you from damage. So it seems like maybe Hyperion, Dahl, Atlas, those kind of things could be making appearances as weapon parts. Like maybe you can get an Atlas part and your rounds would, seek out enemies, but they might not be a specific weapon manufacturer. I think this is more than fine. I think the amount of variance that's going to be in the game with all of the different parts, a Malawan weapon might feel a lot more like a Jacob's weapon if it's got all like Jacob's parts. So things are going to get really crazy with this, the different parts on different weapons. The next thing they mentioned that was really interesting is there is full mission and boss replay. So if you are farming a boss for loot, you do not need to save quit anymore. There's going to be a like Moxie device that you can click that will respawn the boss so that you can fight it over and over and over again. It doesn't sound like you need like a resource to spawn it. You could just spawn the boss. We'll see exactly how that machine works. But they also mentioned that you can replay any mission again, which means like, if you complete a main mission, you could go back and just do it again to maybe get the rewards or experience it again. I'm kind of inferring that that might mean that there isn't a true Vault Hunter mode. Obviously, I don't know that, but the fact that you can just go and replay missions, I'd be kind of curious if that's kind of a thing that you could do, replay them on like a harder difficulty for maybe better loot and better stuff rather than like starting the campaign all over again, but we'll have to see. And the last thing to mention is that with this game being like a semi-open world with different regions that you can explore, that they said is completely seamless to go between, how the game is going to function is going to be pretty different. It's a big change for Borderlands, and with these massive open areas, they've said that there's going to be different world activities to do. They showed off these silos, which are these like kind of objectives that you can clear, kind of like an outpost that will then ping information about where you go find vault key fragments. And then if you find vault key fragments, then you can go and do a dungeon. And then the dungeon is kind of like a high end activity that you can do. But there's also activities such as like patrols that are going to be going around. There's apparently world bosses that like huge bosses can just kind of appear in your areas. And so it's going to be really interesting now that we've got like a full campaign that you can do to like progress and level up, but also so much to go out and explore. Maybe if you're not high enough level to do the next quest, maybe you'll go out and do some dungeons or explore some caves or do some things. The whole kind of dynamic is going to be shifting with progression and, exploration in this game. And while it is an open world game, I really hope that the environments feel handcrafted enough, that exploration feels rewarded, and that there's so many cool things to go out and find. I just cannot wait to explore this game. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about. I didn't get to everything here. I'll probably have some follow-up videos on some more specific analysis on some things. But yeah, Borderlands 4 is looking great in my opinion. Let me know what you think down below. There is a lot of changes here. It is looking quite different. Some things, people are not super excited about. Some things people are very excited about. Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.